Hello, welcome to the very first episode of Byte-size Opinions, underrated or overrated. I am very happy to welcome Denis, our very first guest. Denis, would you like to say some couple of words about yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's a cool format. Really looking forward to this. I'm a technical and leadership coach. Just as a disclaimer, Vladi and I used to work together last year for quite a while. He entrusted me with training his team, and we did some one-on-one coaching as well. So really looking forward to catch up. First and foremost, catch up with you. We also have kids at around the same time, and the controversial topics, the opinions.
Yeah,
Bite-sized
we
opinions.
had a lot of fun last year, and this year we're also having fun, but basically in a different format for now, at least.
Yes.
All right. So for everybody watching, the rules are very simple. We have a bunch of topics. Well, I have a bunch of topics, and the guest, Denis in this case, will put a verdict. Is this keyword topic underrated or overrated? And then, of course, we will talk a bit about the why behind the verdict. That's it. I'll be waiting for comments and suggestions for future topics as well. So, Denis, are you ready?
Let's go.
Let's go. So, the very first topic for today is test-driven development, also known as TDD, underrated or overrated?
I think overrated.
Oh, interesting. Why do you say it's overrated?
Well, I think the way it's perceived in the industry in itself, it's getting this rating of fixing all of your problems, but really it just captures good hygiene. People like to say, "Oh, it's overrated because I need to understand my problem before I start working on it," right? So it's this chicken egg problem of, do we want this or do we not want this? Do we understand it? Do we not understand it? Do we want quality? Is quality negotiable? So in an environment where you would normally do it, I would say this is just baseline hygiene for a high quality environment. But there are many environments where quality is not understood, where it's not put on paper. So in general, I think it would be overrated. Definitely LinkedIn seems to think it's overrated. Even though most of my network, I have to admit, are very good, very, very strong TDD practitioners. I myself am a TDD practitioner.
All right. So when you say depending on the environment, are you referring to a specific industry, a type of company, or what else?
I focus on small to medium businesses, scale-up startups, mostly in Europe and North America. So from my context, it's usually like understanding business problems and connecting business understanding with programming skill is more important than TDD, because you can't do TDD without that. Because TDD is a practice that I recommend that you do, but not because I say it, because that's what makes it overrated. It's like I've found a way that TDD helps me manage a lot of emotions involved with how the team operates. But unless we declare that that's a high priority for us to solve, that is a problem worth solving, TDD is just going to be the same kind of fashion statement as serverless or microservices. To most people.
Okay. To most people, right?
Yeah.
All right. This conversation brings a bit some flashbacks from last year. All right. Well, I think we can move on to the next topic, which is Scrum. Is Scrum overrated or underrated?
I think overrated. Overrated. Yeah. Similar to TDD. When I come in coaching, and you know this yourself, I don't tell you not to do Scrum. I encourage you not to do Scrum if it doesn't serve you. But this idea that there's organizational practices between where we're headed and how technology serves business problems should be core DNA without something like Scrum. If the core DNA is missing and then you put Scrum on top of it, there's nothing, it's a multiplier, but if the core thing is missing, you're not multiplying anything. But a team
you're multiplying the bad things.
Yes, potentially. There are instances where Scrum is just multiplying the bad things, and then that is when I would then encourage, maybe stop some of its practices, which is why I would call it overrated, right? So, which is the same thing as with TDD. If your sole purpose with TDD is to hunt code coverage, I would say you're chasing the wrong thing.
Right? Yes, definitely, right? Yeah.
Because that's one of the main selling points. It's like you'll get naturally high code coverage, which is great, but it's not anywhere near the main predictors of success.
I actually like the parallel with TDD because essentially the message is you should first really understand the whys and what's behind them. Just applying some rules sort of blind, it will get you nowhere and be in your way most of the times.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you and I did. One of the reasons you hired me last year was to do TDD and DDD with your team. And you noticed that we didn't write a lot of tests because we were stuck in an environment where the team didn't have any evidence that with the problems they were facing, testing would in some way help their situation, right? So there was an order to things that had to happen, which is learn how to manage their time better, learn how to communicate differently. There are also like implicit relationships with, is this one team? Is this always the same team? Does the product shift slightly? Are there different colors to the tasks? Should all tasks be tested to the same level of quality? Kent Beck in his this Desiderata mentions tests should be writable, meaning that the relative cost to writing a test should be following the relative cost of the benefit that the code provides, right? So if most of your work is maintenance on a long-lived system, if you don't plan to do major changes to it, maybe you shouldn't be test covering it. Maybe you should be refactoring it without tests first, which is, you'll find, is actually what we ended up doing most of the time. And then we only covered, we minimized the amount of Scrum we were doing. We minimized the amount of TDD we were doing. And then on the things where it really mattered, we did it really well, rather than doing it blanket across everything very badly. That's why I would say it's overrated. It's a good tool for certain problems, but the more you cram into it, the less. It's not a good general tool. That's how I would put it. Scrum is not a good general tool. It's a very good tool for optimizing a singular pipeline of multidisciplinary, single team focus product development, and that's just product engineering. Even with maintenance, there's already problems. Keeping the lights and activities, customer support, etc.
As always, dear listeners, the answer is it depends. You will probably get a bit tired of this, at least in this podcast. But anyway, okay, let's move on now to the next one, which is working at a startup. Usually, when I thought about this topic, I meant as a developer. But I think we can include almost any kind of role because real startups are something else from my perspective.
I think it's underrated. I think it's underrated. Yeah, I love working at startups. Most of my time, I worked at startups where they were either funded by American or UK or British VC companies, and we had a lot of success in that. The startups didn't always succeed by some general unicorn metric, but it's really, really fun to work at a startup because you get to practice plasticity, essentially. You get to be in multiple roles at the same time, and you get to explore sort of horizontal, vertical movement. There isn't a lot of vertical movement at the beginning, but there's a lot of horizontal movement. You might switch teams, you might switch departments. You might switch products very aggressively. You might change the way how you work. And you might even switch one startup for the other. You might be job hopping, which also happens in corporate culture. But I think there's a lot to be learned in working at a startup.
In a shorter amount of time, you learn.
Yeah. I mean, you need to think on your feet, right? So startups favor people who are self-taught. I'm self-taught, so it's a natural sort of predictor for, let's say, cohesion. Startup favors people who are self-taught, who are MBAs, who are sort of small business owners, who are entrepreneurs. It's if you can get entrepreneurial thinking and people who don't want the corporate culture of, let's say, non-big tech technology companies, like somewhere between 500 and 1.5k employees, then a startup might be a good choice. But then again, you have big companies like Stripe still calling themselves startup, even though
they're huge, but they have a Stripe culture, perhaps. But it's not really the same thing.
It's not the same thing.
Because it's a matter of the role, the responsibilities, the width of your responsibilities, and also I think how much impact you can have in a smaller company.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would really focus emphasis on the shares, on any kind of stock options or ownership options or any kind of way to get equity in the organization. Because the best thing you can do is to work at a large corporation that is on the public market, so you can get shares. Or you work in a startup where you can get equity, even at the risk of the equity not being worth anything. That meaning attributed to it still means a lot to the people in the startup while they're working at the startup. And that creates its own kind of culture. There's nothing worse than working at a medium-sized business that is not a startup, that doesn't have any plans to go public, and nobody is sharing equity anymore, right? So there's no equity reserve. The founders are the founders. They will always be the founders. And then there's just rotation. There isn't any horizontal movement or growth, right? So that third type of company, I think, for me personally, is the worst kind to work at. And it's exactly that startup mentality that's lacking there. There are negative parts to working at a startup, but that's,
which leads us to the, let's say, footer note that working at a startup is not really for anybody. I mean, it probably takes a certain personality, I guess, and you would have to enjoy a certain way of working as well, because there's a bit of chaos and disorganized and organized chaos.
I mean, startups don't have to be chaotic, right? So you can have a deliberate flexibility by virtue of not implementing hard silos or hard departments, and you keep things flexible for as long as possible. For example, the most recent startup that has been very successful is possibly OpenAI. They are by all definitions of the word a startup. They even had ownership issues recently, and in what was it, November last year, which typical I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen in startups where I worked at, where the founders had a conflict and they tried to push each other out. Exact same story has happened in Facebook with one of the original founders, right? So you see these things happening. But then there's also the more corporate side of startups, where at a certain level of scale, you will want some, let's say, some hierarchies or some reporting forms or shapes to coalesce, to organize themselves and to catch up, essentially. It depends on what you want from a startup. If you want this entrepreneurial energy that we will create a product, and if it fails, we'll pivot and we'll keep doing that, because it gives you a lot of flexibility. It definitely allows for a lot of innovation and for usage of boring technologies in new and exciting ways.
And if you're lucky and you stay at the same startup for a longer period of time and the startup grows organically, you will eventually end up going vertically as well, not only horizontally. And you would probably, if you're in the beginning, since the beginning, you can also choose which vertical you can go into deeper.
Yeah, startups actually also have that unique property that they are one of the few organizations that grow down, right? So you can start as a CTO, and then you will expand your vertical downwards, right? So you can have a CTO, you can be a founding CTO of a startup, and then have people report to you, and you will hire people like that will report to you, that will take over parts of your responsibilities without being demoted, right? So or without doing a horizontal step, which is something not possible in traditional, more corporate or just traditional structures. Even with teams, you know, if you're a tech lead, it's possible that your team will grow and you have to split it in two. You will remain in some tech lead or engineering manager position without being promoted to VP, because the organization might be too small for a VP or for a director of technology or for some kind of senior manager. And then you'll basically, you know, I was definitely in that situation where my team grew from 5 to 20. And then we organically had to coalesce around our informal authority. The people in the top went to specialize into their areas, and then I got to split part of a team and share responsibilities with other leaders, some of them whom I mentored to be leaders, to help coach and help them grow. And that then gave them an extra level of excitement. Even though the growth track was informal, the relationships were much richer. It was much more face-to-face, right? It was less so an ability matrix in your HR report. It was much more, hey, I can now trust you to lead this. Like, do you want to take point on the next, you know, on next month for whatever this team is working on?
Very good example. Thank you. I think this topic of career path and possibilities and growth, that's a very large subject and very different from company to company and even industries, I think. Yeah. All right. So let's move on now to Web3. If you, some of you still remember, there was a very intense period 3 years ago, I think, and it was branded as Web3. Usually it meant NFTs and crypto
in general,
and blockchain. So what's your verdict?
This was hard. The parts of it, I would say it's underrated. Like the blockchain aspect is over. Like I don't think you need to tech on blockchain on everything.
As always.
But I mean, the technology is amazing. You know, the amount of disruption that Bitcoin and Ethereum have brought is amazing, even to this date, right? People invest into Bitcoin thinking that it's a stable, uncontrolled, or at least it's a fairly controlled. Even if there is corruption, the corruption is, you know, the playing field is even. And you can only get capitalism-wide corruption, not institutional corruption, right? So the playing field is even. It seems to be a good protocol. It's not an asset that pays dividends in any way. So it's just, you know, you just hold it and then hope its value will go up. So it's not like investing into a company. You know, if I'm looking at it from a financial instrument perspective, it's definitely underrated. And we have a lot more to see. But now I'm talking about Bitcoin. Web3, but coding on top of like blockchain technology and ledgers and the whole thing that was happening with Ethereum, where they're sort of trying to create this marketplace where you could exchange tokens and ICOs for every company, and every company having its own token for something, for some utility, and then the American SEC coming in and sort of not arguing whether it's a security or an asset or property. It's that part I don't think is valuable. That to the blockchain part, I think, doesn't serve a purpose other than for the financial instrumentation part. I haven't seen a lot of good applications of it. Some practical applications of it. I can't name any consumer product or B2B product that would benefit from blockchain technology. that wouldn't be in the financial instrument business.
Okay. All right. So
NFT
tough
plus.
answer.
So yeah, tough answer. But I think Web3, Bitcoin included, underrated. But I don't think companies should push blockchain into every product. There are some products where it makes sense, but I think the product would have to make sense in a unique way without the blockchain, and that's not the point. So.
All right. Now, next one. Another popular topic these days, AI replacing software engineers. What's your verdict?
Overrated. I think overrated. Similar to TDD, what we discussed earlier. I think AI is useful. The more experienced you are, the less useful it gets. Obviously, the entire engineering space. So there is huge demand and there is huge surplus. That's very unique. Right? So there's a huge demand for engineers, and a lot of engineers are not being hired. So that means that there are a lot of unskilled engineers in the market, and the unskilled engineers benefit the most from AI tools.
True.
Like Copilot. Like, relatively speaking,
because the impact is visibly higher for them. Yeah.
Relatively speaking.
Correct.
Yes. So the people who benefit the most are not going to be replaced by the thing they benefit from. Because at worst, the AI will be a more complicated junior engineer. Right? Because if nobody's hiring them, then nobody will hire the engineer who acts exactly like them. They can be scaled, right? So the other part, I think the shining light here for AI, not so much for engineers, is that the AI doesn't need to be a lot better than the engineer. Right? Because if I can run the AI 24/7 and you can only work 40 hours per week, then I need to get it to the point where it can self-correct in 24/7 mode in a week to what you would come up with in 40 hours, which already gives it an advantage. But it might be expensive to run it, which again creates a skew of only the people who can afford that are people who don't have problem hiring engineers, because it would be the big tech companies.
This sort of reminds me, you mentioned sometime in the past about a ratio of the number of junior developers in a team against the senior developers. What was the ratio?
I think the conversation you're referencing is 2-1, the 2 seniors to 1 junior on a stable team. And if you can't help it, 1-1. But generally, you don't want the juniors to be in a majority position. Unless
you said the AI might eventually be a sort of like a junior, and I'm thinking that ratio would still be kept needed.
Yeah. I mean, right now, that's the thing, right? I mean, you have a team of 2 seniors and maybe a junior, and the seniors use AI some other time to get a little bit of benefit. That's following in that ratio. So I think AI is useful, but this idea of AI replacing software engineers is overrated. If nothing else, you will still need to learn how to prompt it, how to talk to it, right? So AI does coding very well, but not engineering. So you would still need engineers. The engineers might not be coding. I'm happy if the AI can take over coding, but then if
I can think of a problem instead of dealing with the mundane.
But then I would spend 8 hours of my day engineering, which is what I'm doing right now. But instead of, I don't know, an hour of coding, I do an hour of whatever it does. Or it does 24 hours of coding while I'm spending most of my time engineering, right? So these things are not related directly. They're orthogonal concepts.
I'm putting myself now in the shoes of let's say a junior developer or somebody who doesn't know to program much and wants to get into this field. And it feels like the market is not very friendly for them right now. And also,
it never has been. Let's be clear, it never has been.
Yeah, but I mean, no, not really. There were a couple of years ago, there was a big boom when a lot of companies were hiring a lot, and it was enough for you to be able to, in an interview, to say a couple of keywords, and boom, you get hired.
But that's still the case. It's just that engineers don't go to those places anymore. I mean, imagine the last time I went interviewing for a large company was a few years ago after COVID.
Okay.
Just before you signed up, just before I had the baby, I figured, okay, which option is better? And I went exploring the job market. I got a few offers, wasn't happy with them, and focused on coaching instead. And what I realized is that, yeah, the opportunities are there. I needed to send out at least, 200 applications to get 3 offers in Europe. And I'm hearing it's a lot worse. And it's a lot worse now if you're a junior and if you're if you don't have a network to rely on, or if you don't really know what you're looking for, etc. But pre-COVID, I would never primarily look for a remote position. So pre-COVID, I would just look at my current city, talk to the 3-4 top prospects, go on an interview, and I would get a job the next week. It's just that I'm not doing that anymore because I can get paid more getting a remote job. But if that opportunity was not possible, I would get a job much faster. But it would pay me less. But it would pay you more compared to not getting a job because you're aiming too high. That doesn't mean that you should be paid less. But what I'm saying is that the virtue of remote work allowed a lot of people to concentrate towards the better jobs, and now less people are, I'm speculating, but I'm assuming less people are unemployed because they are aiming for that perfect job. They would rather not take the lousy job, even as entry level, because they think that as long as they keep trying long enough, they will get it. Whereas at the beginning of my career, I looked at my options in my current city. I had 3 options, and I choose one from those 3 options. That's it. And I took action immediately on a very small sample size. Whereas now with remote interviewing, I don't do so. I sort of, people are automating. How can I send 1,000 AI generated CVs to 1,000 companies so that then an AI can sift through it and filter them out and get them to ASTs and then get them to actually to a human manager. And God forbid that they're doing a robot test to make sure that I'm not a deep fake on
yes, it's
right?
crazy
on video, right? So that's, I would say, getting a job now it was always hard. If I wanted to work at Google 20 years ago, it would also been hard. I would have to go on a plane, possibly, have telephone interviews. Those would have been stressful. Might get rejected a few times. Have to fly out for an on-site. Maybe that on-site now is remotely, but it still takes, 8 hours of just Zoom calls. And that's just Google. Now imagine every other company, right? So it's possible that you are now overwhelming yourself by doing on-site interviews. Like some of these interview processes have, 7 stages for an engineering position. And that's the equivalent of going to the company and spending a day or 2 with them and then coming home and then being assessed. And that's normal. It's just that the approach is different, but that's not our topic.
So basically, HR is broken. My point is, as a junior, how and adding this AI stuff, what would your advice be for them? Should they learn prompt engineering? Should they rely a lot on AI? Should they ignore?
I think you should mostly ignore it. I think you should learn how to use LLMs in your life in general, not as an engineer. right? Don't think about it like an engineer. Think about it like having a coach/mentor that you can ask for advice. Like, don't tell it to write code for you. Tell it to help teach you how to write code.
Nice.
The code that will produce either it'll be amazing and you won't understand it, and then if it brought more understanding to the table than you did, then you would understand it. And if you don't understand it, you won't learn anything from it, right? Because you learn by making mistakes, and if you bypass the mistake by letting the LLM code it for you, then you'll only learn from somebody else that the LLM made a mistake, and that'll just shine a bad light on you. Recently, we had this issue on, I think, curl. Curl was attacked by AI Devin-generated PRs, where they sent LLMs through the codebase, and the LLMs opened up PRs on GitHub reporting bugs. And a lot of the bugs were hallucinated. But the problem was that the conversation to triage the bug was also an AI, and they hallucinated with each other. And then a human had to go and read a completely hallucinated
mumbo jumbo
to figure out whether this PR can be closed safely or not.
Sort of a nightmare,
right? So if you're aiming towards that, that's just that's the equivalent of having a call center and people who don't know what they're doing being offered a script and then following the script, and then you still need to do damage control. If you're an engineer and you want to learn, use AI to help you in the learning process. When I write articles, I don't tell it to write an article for me. I tell it, hey, help me brainstorm.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to write an article. Help me, I want to focus on this and this and this. What should I prompt you so that I can make progress in this direction? Then it will, give me 3 variations. And then it tells me what to prompt it. And then I prompt it. And then I tell it, hey, okay, we had this conversation. You told me to prompt you this. I don't think we're making progress. How should I refine this so that I can get closer to this? This is my writing style. No, this is my writing style. This is what you came up with. What should I prompt you so you'll be closer to my writing style? What stands out to you as being key to my characteristic? And then we do some syntax checking and some general verbiage about just getting it cleaner and easier to understand without actually it losing soul. That's for writing, for example. But for engineering, I might do something like, hey, I'm writing a code for a coding game. I do a code with a lot of Bitburner, prepping a course for Bitburner. And I use AI sometimes because it's a game. It has a simulation of a stock market. I'm saying, I'm creating an algorithmic trader for this game, but it's modeled on a pretty realistic stock market. What kind of algorithms do stock market algorithms generally use? And then it tells me, it uses MACD for signal detection and this and this and this and this. Okay, can you show me some examples in TypeScript? Okay, well, can you help me build intuition on this? And it will tell me, yes. So if you want to focus more on this, then you would change this in the algorithm. And then it teaches me how to understand what I'm reading, right? So I'm using AI as a tool to generate on-demand documentation for me that is catered to my current needs right now. And for that case, it's amazing. I give it a golfed code snippet, golfing as in it was obfuscated and shortened. And I tell it, hey, can you explain what this does? And then it'll tell me. Right?
Yeah.
So that's amazing.
I used it for certain projects, small repositories I was looking at, and they were written in a programming language that I was not very familiar with. So I also used it to explain this to me so I can better understand a bit.
Yeah.
That's also
in a programming language that you don't understand, the inspiration it gives you to take a move forward is really helpful, even if you don't take the suggestion. Right, so there is value even for seniors about being given a suggestion, and it gives you an idea, but then you reject
and
the suggestion.
gets the ball rolling, and that's it.
But it gets the ball rolling. But you just seeing the suggestion gave you an idea, but then you went and coded it yourself. That is valuable. What is not valuable is when I see developers not taking the suggestion and not getting a new idea from the suggestion. and then they just keep being interrupted because they code, and then the suggestion appears, and then they analyze it. No, it's wrong, and they keep typing. They analyze it. No, it's wrong. So if that's how you're coding, and that's my kids in the background, so sorry about the noise.
No worries.
By the sound of it, they're taking a bath. So what I'm saying is, if the suggestion doesn't give you new inspiration, tone the suggestions down. Don't invite the Copilot, for example, or IntelliJ AI. Don't invite it to be everywhere. Tweak the options so that you need to prompt it explicitly. So that you need to say, code, context, question, give me suggestions. So actually prompt it. Don't do the full Copilot experience where it just keeps spewing stuff in your code editor. I also find it very distracting. When I'm pairing with somebody and I see their Copilot spewing stuff constantly onto the screen, I find it very distracting.
All right. Now we can move to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Pair programming, underrated or overrated?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. I would lean more on the underrated side. There are still people who don't know how to pair program well or how to take advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say underrated. I think the overrated side is pull requests. So I come from an extreme programming background, and we experimented with this on your team as well. So I think a team that leans heavily on pull requests, they might be overrating pull requests and underrating pair programming.
Fair.
Right. So pull requests are asynchronous pairing, essentially. You're waiting for another human's feedback.
It reminds me of a different conversation where I had with somebody, and basically the idea was that relying 100% on pull requests means you don't trust your team members. Would you say it's fair, or besides open source project, and I'm talking
so that's
about
how but that doesn't mean that you don't trust them. So pull requests were created for low trust open source projects where it was important for people to have access to the code base, but not full access to the code base.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where you created this environment where it was easy to read, easy to suggest, but hard to modify without a second pair of eyes. Right? So it was very difficult to write something, to destroy something by only one person being involved. A no trust environment would be you don't have access, you don't see it, you don't have write access, you cannot make suggestions. Right? So that's, imagine a Google document where you just don't have permission to it.
View only.
No, not even view.
Not even. Yeah. I don't trust.
I don't
no
trust
access.
Yeah. No NDA, no code. You sign an NDA, you get the power to suggest. Now, I don't like that approach in a company.
In a startup, at least.
In a startup, at least, yeah. Because I want you to be able to take control of it. Generally, the PRs establish a power dynamic where the two scenarios I hear the most is a senior or a leader says, "Oh, PRs is how I train my juniors because I leave them feedback." Right, and I don't like that take. I prefer pair programming for that. The second take is the other way around. I'm working on a complicated subsystem. I want people to give me, to help me, sort of make sure I didn't make a mistake, which is also terrible, because pair programming is much better for that. Right? If you're in a risky situation, like in a database, the larger the code change, the more likely it is that people will just, it looks good to me, just scroll through and blah, blah, blah. Right?
And even if they skip, even if they don't skip, it's too much context for one person to just review. So it's the same.
And even with the teaching, right? So pair programming, the issue with not pair programming, but pull requests. So the issue with pull requests primarily is that it creates a second derivative to work, where I can say I've created a pull request, and then now it is in a half state of done. Right? So I'm kind of not working on it anymore, but it's not done. Right? So pairing means that when it's half working, the other person is doing their half while I'm pairing with them. So we're both done at the same time. That's the idea. And then if you're using Code With Me from IntelliJ, for example, commits that you create in such an environment will also have both authors' names in the commit, so that even your CI/CD pipeline will pick up, oh, this was pair programmed, this doesn't need to be reviewed. This was already reviewed.
Nice.
Right, so that's also another benefit. I think pair programming is underrated for the sole purpose of highlighting on face-to-face conversation. Like, it didn't used to be like this. It used to be that pair programming meant that there was a dominant person at the keyboard, and there was another person passively sitting by, and the person at the keyboard had a more, I'm kind of working, you're just helping attitude. But that was because offices generally didn't have a remote-first culture, right? So it was very difficult for me to take control of your mouse and you were sitting right next to me without leaving my desk. But modern tools, the pair programming tools have improved substantially. We can open up a Code With Me session. You can sit right next to me, and I can type on my keyboard and change things in your editor without us having to do chatty commits. And that's really important, right? So this cloud-based pair programming is what really allowed for a lot of productivity, or at least for a lot of collaboration. Because you creating a PR that has to be reviewed later, that's not collaboration. That's not learning. Right? PR should not be behavior changes. PR should be, you understood what you needed to do, it works, but we will now rewrite it because I will give you feedback on design. Right? So it works, it's done, and now we will redesign it. We will write it one more time. Right? So PR should only be about design and architecture, never about behavior. It's like, oh, I don't think you got it right. Oh, I think we should do this and not do that. In the PR, it's already too late to have that conversation. Right? Which is, we did this on your team as well. Sometimes we had this on Jira, but then it was sometimes not obvious when somebody was working on something or when they were stuck on support or some other task. So we could only give them feedback on a PR because that was the first collaboration point. But then we started actively pair programming where appropriate, and the amount of stale PRs went down. I mean, even to the degree that it went down to 0 on certain projects, because we just closed and merged everything that we worked on because we were pairing and sometimes ensembling with three or more people on a certain feature. And sometimes we created something that never got merged because we all agreed that actually, you know what we created is actually silly, and then we just deleted it.
Yeah.
But at least we all made the decision at the same time, but we just deferred the delete to make sure that we're not doing a silly decision.
Regarding the tools available to us now for pair programming, I had an amazing experience a couple of days ago where not only I managed to easily, get a hold of the keyboard and a mouse and such and take control, but I also, after I made the changes, they were automatically compiled, and my own browser was refreshing and was getting the data from his local host. And it basically we were both be able to look at the same thing and inspect the same thing, and it was extremely useful and fast, and it went like a charm.
What did you use for that?
VS Code for that. Yeah.
VS Code and IntelliJ have amazing pair programming tools. And even the web-based, right? So you have Dockerized web-based editors now, especially if you're in the Node.js environment where everything can run in your browser.
Yeah.
You can spin up Node.js in your browser, you can spin up a server in your browser, and then you can basically compile in your browser as well with WebAssembly, and you have tools that basically allow you to run some part of your CI/CD pipeline in your browser while you're remotely collaborating with somebody. So you can even work on not your laptop, on somebody else's laptop on a plane, potentially, right? So when you don't have all of your things installed, or when you're on a VPN.
All right, we have 3 more topics to go.
All right, let's go.
All right. LinkedIn, the social network.
I think it's underrated as a social network.
Okay.
I think the TikToks, Instagrams, X, I think they all underestimate LinkedIn. LinkedIn just recently created a whole audio to mirror what Clubhouse is doing, and video to mirror what YouTube Live is doing, like Twitch, sort of. I started streaming on LinkedIn, and it's a very underutilized platform. So getting amazing engagement on LinkedIn, much better than YouTube, surprisingly much better, and much more engaged audience. So definitely underrated as a social network, as like as a video platform. Yeah, that's what I have to say to LinkedIn. A lot of people who are not in tech, they tell me LinkedIn is a recruiting platform primarily.
It's kind of started that way.
Yeah, but I don't see it that way. To me, it's just a social media making money off of advertising and off of like these corporate feature gates where you get to create a corporate brand and funnel a hiring funnel, but you would very rarely be hired through LinkedIn. Generally, the agency that you hire uses LinkedIn to, you outsource LinkedIn.
Source you, yeah.
Yes, you do sourcing with it, but you don't really do the hiring process with it. So I disagree with it that this is a sort of one-stop shop for like a recruitment agency that you can sort of buy and then use it. I mean, Sales Navigator is nice, but there are alternatives. So I think it's underrated as a social network.
Got it. Next up is newsletters, aka email marketing.
No, it's tough.
From a perspective of the content creator, let's say, not necessarily the reader.
That's tough. I think it's tough. I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle.
Yeah.
Let's go with underrated. Because I think I run a newsletter, and a lot of people tell me what to do. I asked out, personal branding, solopreneur, coaching, consultant. What should I do? They said post every day on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And it's a silly strategy because you're fighting the algorithm. It's about attention span. The posts that have the best engagement have the lowest shelf life. It's not evergreen. There's no index. There's no catalog. You don't own the content. Whereas if you do newsletters, especially on a domain name that you own, or if you have a blog that also works as a newsletter, that was actually my first thing that I was looking for. Substack, a website that upon posting posts the exact same format in an email. Up until 2022, I was constantly looking for services as a nerd that allowed me a CI/CD pipeline where I say, if I send an email, I want it on my website, or if I have it on my website, I wanted to send an email, because that was the natural workflow, right? I wanted a content presence, like I wanted to have a thought leadership presence about a certain topic, about a series of topics. And that was very hard to do because you either had a blog or you had email marketing as a sales funnel. For sales funnels, I think it's overrated. For B2B sales, it's amazing. For B2B communication, it's amazing. But I think the idea of having newsletters is underrated. So me as a business, I find much better traction, much better engagement, much better presence posting a newsletter and then having it on Substack every day on LinkedIn, or even just doing email campaigns without it having, on a website-based presence.
I'm not very familiar with Substack. I'm a reader, basically. I have a ton of newsletters I subscribe to through them. Do you own the content, your content, basically?
Yes. You don't own the platform, so they could decide to boot you off. It's the same thing with. I mean, if you don't own it, you need to have the rights for it, right? So you don't have to bypass any copyright laws. The good part about is that you get to monetize it. So this is where I think Medium failed.
Yeah.
Medium failed to provide a lucrative deal for why somebody should be a Medium subscriber, because you subscribe to Medium wholesale, but you didn't really have an allegiance to an author. Like I couldn't pay an author. I had to pay Medium, and then Medium would give me paid content, and then the author would be paid on how many millions of views it got, rather than it being paid because he converted Denis. Right? So if I paid 10 per month, I would give my 10 to the author, but then the author was judged by, you contributed to 0.0001 new subscriptions, so we give you 2 cents rather than the 10 that I paid. So I think the more it grew, the more it diluted the value to the authors, and that's nonsense. It has to be a business first, and it wasn't. And Medium was extremely aggressive with paywalling. Yes. And I couldn't control the paywall. The author, I couldn't control the paywall. I couldn't say, okay, up until here, and then it's free, or it's free for a week. And Substack allows you to do that. So what Substack is becoming is basically becoming OnlyFans for content creators and thought leaders. Right, because you have a one-stop shop for monetization. That's what all the other platforms get wrong. You post stuff on LinkedIn, you can't monetize it. You have to have secondary monetization tied in. You can have monetization on Calendly, for example, of pay me to have a meeting with me. That's amazing, by the way. But it's not a easy step, because you have to go through LinkedIn, and there's another website, and then there's another, and then you go from there to Stripe, and then you come back, and then, right? It's not organic. So people did websites for that, but the websites then required aggregation of testimonials, which are mostly coming from LinkedIn, right? So having a one-stop shop on Substack, I see a lot of content creators that are like paid content creators like myself. We started really aggressively monetizing and say, look, you can pay monthly, you can pay yearly, or you can pay beyond that. And for that, you get free coaching from me once a year. I mean, not free, but like you can decide what topic and sort of free-form coaching, because you're added a pledge and you get VIP service, basically. And it already has your credit card. It's very easy to bump it up, right? So it's basically becoming X. X is doing something similar now, where it's going, again, through this model of, I have a content creator, a thought leader, you're already paying to have access to X or whatever, and then you're basically paying for extra content, or you're giving them a tip, or you're contributing towards them, or like on Twitch, you're subscribing so you get access to emojis, or you get to show your badge that you're a viewer of this person or not that person, that you're, that this tribal affiliation on the entertainment sector. I think Substack is definitely underrated in that sense. Right now, we're experimenting with ideas of, can I set up coaching on Substack? Right, so I have paid content. I paywall it more aggressively, So it's what you would expect in a coaching call, but in written form. But then you basically just subscribe to the newsletter rather than doing full coaching. And that's your sort of first tier. The second tier is you pledge, you become a yearly subscriber. And then that involves, 4 sessions per year, and you can decide when that is. And then going beyond that, to have an extra bonus call whenever you want it, to actually get help or insights or an internal community that can then sort of have a chat together. Refactoring by Luca is a very good example of this. He has a primarily paid community, and he has CTOs in there primarily, and thought leaders and tech leads who are then networking together or who are looking for insights or sponsorships. Luca then also gives you deals that might give you a sort of step in the door for negotiating a discount with some B2B SaaS provider, of saying, hey, use this code to then get a quick discount to trial a SaaS product. And then maybe you can talk to this person. Hey, Luca, can you connect me with this and that person? They're in your community. Can we maybe talk about getting a discount, and I don't know, for a ClickHouse database or for a managed Redis instance, or for Key2B now, because Redis is no longer open source. All right, so it's this. I think Substack really nails this idea that empowering, being a thought leader as a business, and giving the author full authority on their success and metrics, and then just giving them a platform, and then they own the platform that drives the ecosystem. X is doing the same thing. Medium failed on this, right? So it heavily wanted to own the platform, the copyright, the editorial practices. I hated being on Medium on a publication, and I saw that it had to be reviewed, edited, and essentially basically gone through a whole editorial process. It got published 3 weeks later than I expected. It got almost rewritten in a different voice, and I got paid 12 cents for it.
Success.
And it's just, I was just like, well, why am I doing this? I didn't expect this. I expected there would be some help. I didn't expect that I would have sort of like a semi-formal contract with some publication. So I think Substack is definitely going places. Newsletters are definitely underrated.
For our visitors and listeners, your Substack is Crafting Tech Teams, I think?
Yes. So I'm running several publications right now. Crafting Tech Teams is my main one. Adrian, who is the Snackable CTO, we are collaborating together on a streaming platform called Our Tech Journey. The canonical link of that is YouTube, but we're primarily getting an audience from LinkedIn Live videos. So we're discussing engineering culture. I'm covering the more middle to bottom vertical. He's covering the more top to C-suite vertical. So we sort of complement each other very well. We have guests once per month. So that's our second publication. And now I've also started aggregating content for Typo app. They're also launching a newsletter, and I'm curating interesting topics about engineering culture, engineering management, productivity, and systems design on a weekly basis. So Substack is becoming a staple ecosystem in my business, which is very unexpected. I wouldn't have been able to guess this a few years ago.
Kudos to them. So one last topic for today is the role of a business analyst in a startup.
In a startup?
Yes.
I think overrated.
Overrated?
Yeah.
Wow, that was fast.
Yeah. Startups should focus on only one thing: product leadership. Right. So you don't want to. Business analysts. I think you have business analysts in environments where you have product management or project management.
Okay.
And the person making product prioritization decisions is different from the engineering team. But it's a role, right? So you can have a role of a product owner, and a role of a business analyst, and a role of stakeholders, and a role of a customer. If there's 5 different people in these 5 roles, I think that's a problem. because then it creates this sort of too many chefs in the kitchen issue. I think startups, small and medium businesses, which is my primary context, should focus on product leadership. Product leadership in the sense of if we've done our homework and the business strategy makes sense, how can I prove that whatever we're doing with the product is connected up to the right feedback mechanisms? If it's a B2C product, do we have communication to the customers? Do we have communication to potential customers? To surveys, to reach out. If it's a B2B pipeline, what is the nurturing period? Do we need to talk to a vertical inside an organization? Do we have access to them before they sign? Do we send engineers over there to nurture them, to provide good developer experience or to provide them with onboarding workshops? Because I see this a lot, right? You sign up for, Salesforce, they will send a team, or they will host a webinar for you, or they will host a workshop for you, and they will charge you for that, right? So that has to be part of the technology features that you build. You say, I will build a feature here, and it doesn't make sense without sending 5 of our people over there to host a workshop. That costs more than building the features, right? So the idea here is, okay, can we make it in such a way, that they can demo it so it won't crash? They can demo it live on their data or live in their context so it makes sense to them. And if it requires developing, that the developer experience of somebody who is on site can then provide that on a longer term time horizon, or a mid-term time horizon, when they can say, okay, we'll get developer experience support for 3 months. Stripe's B2B is notorious. And Klarna, for example, I was integrating in a startup for Klarna. They sent somebody down from Germany, right? And from the Germany office, and the developer got on a plane, boom, landed down, spent a week with us. They helped us integrate.
This was sort of part of the onboarding, I guess.
Yeah. We said we're signing a contract. We're this large. We're a startup. We want to do business with primarily German clients and the rest of Europe. And they said, well, we want the extra, the plus package where you send somebody to help us integrate because we want to be done. We don't want to figure it out. We know it's hard to Google. It's silly to look for on Stack Overflow because it's very niche. It's B2B. It's private code, right? It's proprietary code, B2B. You don't find it on Stack Overflow, right? Which is the same thing with Salesforce. You won't find it on Stack Overflow, right? So what did they do?
Right.
They sent you a representative, a developer, a field, a customer development, whatever they call it, a customer success engineer. They have various titles nowadays, or DevRel, or somebody in DX, or customer sales architect, whatever they want to call it. They send it. They pair program with you essentially. They're available for you to answer questions, and then you integrate with them.
Nice.
So I think a business analyst is very helpful when there are. Right, so what does a business analyst do? Right? Why did I say that it's overrated? So what a business analyst does is you give the business analyst business context and business requirements, and then you tell them, well, this is the best we've come up with. This is where we want to go. Have a better take on it. Right? So it's basically like an LLM. They will go talk to the main people, which an LLM can't do. They will consult with the main people. They will talk to the main stakeholders, and they will triage all of everything that has to be written down on paper, and they will formulate it in a way that says, you are the 7 stakeholders. Here's what you told me you disagree on, which is great as coaching for the stakeholders, which is terrible if you then use this as a grenade to lob it over the engineering wall and say, hey, engineers, here's the requirements. Because then a person who is not very well versed in the relationship gets in the way of product leadership, which is great if you don't have a product, right? If what you're building is a call center for a telco, and every now and then you have to do updates to the user interface because you're adapting to requests, and it's very hard to do, and you have some low-code solution, which is great. For a business analyst, they look at long-term horizon, mid-term horizon, customer success reports. You analyze it, you give them some feedback, you give them some guidance. They create a report, possibly come up with business requirements, and then they try to pitch it. The problem is the budgeting conversation usually happens after. So this would only make sense in a corporate setting where you will have extremely large time horizons, right? So where you would say, oh, we need a budget that exceeds our yearly budget, so let's make this a 5-year project. Generally, in startups, you don't have this time horizon.
Definitely not.
Right. So for example, in OpenAI, it's very hard to have a business analyst because they're moving too fast.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to be moving extremely slowly so that you can have a paper trail where a business analyst can, without interfering with all the teams, without being part of the teams, basically create a picture that is realistic and makes sense and sort of touches ground, right? It's grounded in reality. And they can come up with a plan that can be acted upon and executed before the plan becomes stale. Generally, that only works in startups that work very slowly. And that is then usually a sign that, hey, maybe we should just fix the core issue of maybe we should go faster on less things rather than slowly on a large thing. But it depends on whether that's an option. You know, you yourself, you mentioned when you're working together that a lot of the issues were the high lead time on acquiring a new B2B market, especially the enterprise market. You know, could take 6 to 14 months of nurture. That's usually that's somewhere in the middle there for the industry in general.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do like lean product development in such an environment because you need to really devote a lot of effort into using all of your tricks at your disposal to get feedback early, which means that you need to do a combination of marketing things you don't have before you have them to create demand. And then once you have created demand, then you need to validate it before you've invested too much. But then in order to make the demo realistic, you actually need to be able to consume a high volumes of data, which is very hard to do if you didn't invest a lot into engineering. So you need to have like a very good stable business core model that would allow you to get some freebies of, well, we're already integrated with you on this data, so we can experiment on features adjacent to that data. But it's very hard to do hard pivot products for different customer profiles in enterprise. Salesforce dominates this market for this very reason, right? So the Salesforce, how it works is, and also with Microsoft, with Power BI, is they try to own the data so that businesses would live closer to the data, so that when you have then a new product built on the data, the pipeline is known. Because generally the problem with data is not processing it, it's migrating it. It's like, I can give you access to my data, but you making a copy of it is extremely expensive. And I don't trust you to allow you to do compute in my data center. Right? So you get this push-pull problem of, can I run something realistic on a small subset? And usually the answer is no. So you would have to have deep insight. Business analysts are actually useful for that, to get deep insight in some part of the data, but a data science engineer or data scientist or product engineer might be a better fit for that. You know, B2B SaaS, small, medium business, e-commerce, that's also my core domain. Also now lately, content creation. I was also in crypto, and I said Web3 was underrated for various reasons. I did work in a Web3 startup, and the Web3 technology was basically secondary. It was an esports company, yeah. So it was an esports company, and the product was about esports, not about Web3. it was similar to Substack, right? So
Yeah.
Web3 helped ride the hype that, hey, we should monetize your hobby. There is no shame in monetizing your hobby because this is interesting. Because people monetize betting and people, we have casinos. So why not have a safer option for that, right? So why not have people say, I want to organize a tournament, pay money into the pool, and then people get money for winning the tournament. And then we basically do that on a platform that allows that to happen, that is optimized to catering to sponsors. And then you bypass the whole politics of having to be pro before being able to sort of get into this market.
Nice.
Which is the same issue as with Medium, right? You had to be pro to make a lot of money. So
Yeah.
it was gated behind, we only want the pros, and we would have all this editorial process, and it alienated solopreneur writers, right? So with the same way as how the esports scene, the gating on like high production fidelity quality, and we need like professional cameras and soundproof booths and the stadium, it alienates hobby esports enthusiasts, right? So that was the niche. It had nothing to do with crypto.
No.
The niche was esports, right?
Yeah.
The niche for esports paid professional esports to amateur leagues. That was the niche. And I think, we're still in the context of business analysts. Business analysts are the niche of, can I derive new insights from what we learned? Right, so it's essentially TDD. Can I test? Can I prove that our requirements were wrong in the previous iteration? That's the core idea. A business analyst would have context about why did we make the decisions we made in the previous iteration. And if you can get them close to the product team, I think that's great. If you have one product analyst who basically floats like a Scrum coach would, that they float between many teams, and they don't give analysis. They don't produce an output like a product owner. They teach product leadership. I think that's great. Have an analyst like that, an analyst who coaches, not provides output. I think that's great. I think that's a huge underutilized advantage to product business analysts, but they're not being used like that.
Yeah, definitely not. So to my surprise, we started with the topic of TDD, and somehow we ended back to TDD by this analogy with
I got this
BAs.
from Brian Finster, actually. We had him on our podcast a few times, and he basically says, don't be so arrogant and so sure of yourself to say that everything we assume is correct. The timeline is wrong. The budget is wrong. We're wrong about the customer. We're wrong about our requirements. We're wrong about what detail in the requirements matters. Right? That's all TDD. We should test all of our assumptions. Right? So a business analyst would help an engineering team say, you gave me a set of requirements. What I want to do is, in a matter of a week or a few days, I want to prove as many requirements as possible wrong. Right? I want to prove that actually we don't need that. Actually, that is not feasible. Actually, we thought that would produce X amount of revenue and increase conversion rates. We were wrong for these reasons. And then once you get that, then the whole team with the business analysts coaching or mentoring help can then analyze it and say, yes, you're right. This composition, this new setup, this new set of requirements now uses that feedback, and now it makes more sense, which is exactly how we do TDD, which is exactly how we do BDD, ATDD, which is exactly how we do extreme programming, right? So the business analyst is somebody who can say, I saw you communicate with the customer. You didn't disprove, you didn't validate assumptions. Please go and validate assumptions. You built a feature. You built a feature. Business analyst said, hey, team, I saw you build 3 features. You didn't validate. You didn't deploy them. You didn't validate them for usage. And you didn't validate them for profitability. Please do that before right? Okay, new requirements, blah, 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 blah. Let's validate these assumptions, right? That works as in a coaching capacity, which is also why I don't like, typical Scrum coaches. I don't like Scrum in general, but I don't like typical Scrum coaches, which is why I prefer to work how we work together, right? So
Yeah.
I come in, I can pair with you on any function in your vertical and your horizontal, and I can figure out, well, we built something, but we didn't validate whether it's valuable or not. So maybe next time we should build less, so that we have more time to validate. Why didn't we validate? Well, because we're stuck on customer support. Oh, we were stuck on customer support because one of the things that we built 6 months ago actually accidentally became really popular, and now all of the bugs we didn't validate are coming to the forefront. So now we have this split brain problem of we need to fix bugs from 6 months ago while also building new things we're not validating. If we're not validating them, we'll increase the workload of triage in 6 months, right? So we said, okay, let's get this cadence down. And I couldn't have predicted that. I couldn't have told you that you have this problem without working with you. I was shadowing your team for like 3 months before we said, okay, triage. That's what we need to solve. Yeah. That's the most chaotic bit, right? So that's where most of the requirements and engineering focus diverges. That's where the most divergence happens. And I liked how we did, at a certain point, we did analysis in Jira about triage, and we saw this chart about, it went something like this in focus.
Yeah, all over the place.
And then once we adopted a new procedure, it was like, boop, and it just held a steady pace because we clamped it. We said, we cannot afford to do more triage than this. If we have more problems than this, we're creating more problems. We're creating problems faster than we're creating solutions. So we need to balance that. And once we did that, the chaos went away. Right. So that's, to me, that was business analysis. Right. So the role of that can be embodied and mentored in the team. I'm just not sure that it is a good sort of faraway management practice. It's definitely not a good way of replacing stakeholders to make, to free up calendar space on the stakeholders, on the stakeholders side.
Definitely
Generally, you would want them in a corporate environment where there's so many requirements, a team of 500 people, that just the documentation of the requirements takes a lot of time. It requires a lot of precision and consistency. And that's, I think, where a BA would come.
All right. So that's it. Those were the, 9, 10 topics. I didn't count. Thank you very much, Denis, for your input. And I was very happy as a host. I was very happy to hear some, this is difficult. It made me think that some of them were good topics. And for you listeners and watchers and whatever, please leave some feedback. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like, what you would like to see in the future, propose topics, and maybe even guests. So again, Denis, thank you. And it was lovely hearing from you. And we'll keep in touch shortly.
Thanks for having me. Ciao.
Bye-bye.